welcome everyone in this new live development video about building an auto battle game. In this video, we're going to update some of the logic regarding this, just to make it a little bit more efficient in terms of performance, and to avoid that, and to make sure that the stats we have when we hover a unit are the max stats of that category rather than the current one. Because right now, if I hover the footman, it says 30 HP, we're fine. But if we hit play, and if we hover a unit while it's taking damage, oh, it's still saying 40 HP. Okay, so that part of the logic is right. So that means we're already getting the max stat. Oh, it's just, yeah. That's because we're not reading the current value of the stats, because we're not modifying that value when the unit takes damage, and we want to do this. So we want to do this first. So if we add to our combat unit, I want to see where the oh yeah, that bug. We have to type in the events, I think. The event dispatcher, yeah, we have to unwrap current else. So we want to modify that logic to make it so this follows the stat else, and the stat else gets modified when we take damage as well. So I think we're just going to start by that. So when we take damage, so we're going to close the rest. For now, when we take damage, we're going to decrement stat. I guess we're going to modify consume. Well, decrement stat was good, actually. Decrement stat. Maybe we can just duplicate that for now and call that decrement stat as planned. This is the stat we want to decrement. In stat, reduce value, decrement value. We're gonna hit compile, hit save, and what do we want to do here? We want to find. We don't want to find. Oh yeah, we do. We want to find that stat, and I think we don't care about checking that. We want to break. We want to say that the current value is decremented by that. We want to, and we want to clamp that number. The maximum value of that number is going to be the max value, and the minimum value is going to be 0. And we want to add, we basically want to erase that. We're going to promote that temp value, because I think it might doesn't like it if we plug directly the current value in there. I mean the result of that in there. It might get some strange behaviors, and we don't want that. So we want to add that stat with the same max value than before, and the temp value as current value, and the same modifier than before. And that way we're reducing the value. And when we want to modify this, set stat, this is going to take fstat as parameter and estat as parameter. I should have duplicated the other one. In stat, new value. We want to grab that. We want to add like this. And we want to have a new event dispatcher called dispatch on stat, not on stat update. which is gonna, can we duplicate copy signature from set stat, I guess? In stat new value, yeah. And we're gonna call this. So whenever a stat is modified, we're gonna call this to modify it. So instead of using this, we're gonna use that event we just created. Control click to drag and drop the wires. So we're setting that stat. So whenever we modify, so I think we should even be calling this in the create stat function. This is boring. Yep. When we create a stat, we're doing just this. So this calls the dispatcher. This calls the dispatcher. And is the unit going to listen to that, or the combat unit? I think the unit is going to take care of this. So I guess we have an initialization, extract data from row. So when we extract the data, we are actually creating the stats, create stat, and we shouldn't be calling this here. We should be calling this in here. What is that function? Set unit stat. We're gonna do we have something? No, we have nothing regarding the pool. So I think we're gonna collapse this to a function called deactivate unit. And we're gonna put this in a function called activate unit. So when we activate the units, we are actually extracting the data from rows and we are creating the stat of the unit. So this is the moment where the dispatchers are going to be called. What is going to trigger if we bind ourselves? I think we'll just do it the easy way. So we'll create a new function called set dispatchers enabled. It's going to take parameter be enabled. And when we deactivate the units, we're going to set dispatchers enabled to false. And when we activate it, I think we're going to do it after creating the stats. We're going to set them enabled. And then we want to do something like when we deactivate, we want to unbind an event from the stat update, and we want to bind an event to the stat update. And we want to create a new event here on, oh, I think we might already have this, else, get unit else. Do we have something like this? Set max else, current else. Okay, we don't care. So our new function is going to be called on stat update. Can we copy a signature from something? No, we can't. So it's going to take an estat and an fstat. It's going to ask for an event here. So we're going to create an event on stat update. So we're in a bind and unbind on stat updates when we pull and unpull the units. So this function we just created is going to be called whenever this function is called. So whenever a stat is modified, we're going to receive that in our units. In stat a new value like this. We're going to refresh all nodes. We're going to check if that, we're not going to switch because switching costs way more money than branching several times. So if the update is stats, I think we want to get rid of yeah, this is called, and we're listening to that in the else bar. Update current else. Oh yeah, so we don't need that because so the logic was in the combat unit because the unit is not replicated, so we don't need to do all of this. The else bar is going to tie itself up. Yeah, it's bound to the units. It should be bound to the stat manager here. So if we get the stat manager, we want to bind. Oh, actually we know. So in here, so we want to keep that. We want to keep that dispatcher. We're going to update the values, maybe, or not. We'll see. We want to keep that. We just, maybe we don't need this in the unit. Yeah, we do, because if the unit levels up, we're going to use this to display it. For instance, because if it levels up, it's going to have a stat update. How are we going to do that? I think on else updates, we'll just see, and it's just going to take that as parameter. It won't do anything here, and we're going to override that. In our combat unit. On else update in here. We're just going to print something here. We're going to print something here. And we're also going to say that when we take damage, in addition to doing this, we're going to call our stat manager, and we're going to decrement our else stat by the amount of damage we took. And if we hit play, we want to see the amount of damage here. No, it's going to print hello world. Yeah, so yeah, the else bar is no longer working. Oh yeah, it is. Strangely, it's only working, but we're in the process of fixing it anyway. So this is rightfully being called. The else update in here. So when we take damage, we receive else update. And the server, so we're going to remove this. Control X that, Control X that. The server is going to update the current value, the current else value by the else value here. Yeah, and as I was saying at the beginning of the video, you can see that the else at the top right is saying 22. The else bar is broken, but the else remain correct, and I'm not sure why, but we don't care for now. Is max else still used? Extract data from row. So we don't need this anymore. This is either revive set max else. So when the unit revives, I think we just want to create stat. For now, we're just going to do this. So is max else, so is set max else still called? No. So we can get rid of this. We can get rid of that. And if we hit play, what happens now? Let's check it out. The else bar are full. So it was hard to know what was going on because the units were kind of weak. So the else bar are doing fine, but not the one on the top right, oddly enough. Oh yeah, it's just the first time we over the guy. So we got rid of some of the logic we didn't want. When the else gets modified, we call that. If the else is 0, we are dead. This is going to be in AI. This is going to be in AI. On victory, this is going to be in combat. On pooled, I don't know. Well, we're going to leave this here. Head back to our units. We're going to put this in stats. That as well. Activate units initialization. Deactivate unit initialization. Set dispatchers enabled the same. We're going to hit compile, hit save, head back here, refresh all nodes. Unpooled, I think we can put this in initialization and put this all the way to the top. Set emissive, we're going to put this here because I'm not sure. I don't even remember. What's that for? Oh, I guess, okay. We are lightening them up. So why is the tooltip not working? So everything else is working. They're using the same else bar logic, so I'm not sure why. We're gonna create a logic to slow the time in order to be able to properly check out what's going on. Oh yeah, we got O already. We're gonna put this in T. Like this, hit play. Sorry. Hit T. So yeah, that unit, when we over the unit, it shows the else as full. But if we are over it When it takes damage, we get the information, which means that the first initialization is fake here. Set displayed units. We're initializing the else bar here. We're getting the combat unit. So what's not working here? Our hosted unit is valid. We're storing that. Get unit else, get current else. In here, we're grabbing the current value, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. We're going to duplicate the stat and get max stat. Is going to return the value here. And we're going to get rid of everything that's using this actually. Get stat and get max stat. We want that. This even could be this could be a unit now because units have a stat manager. But we don't care for now. So the max value is that, the current value is that. Where else are we using this? In here, when we are initializing the else bar, we want to get stat, get max stat, the else. I want to get rid of that bit of color. It's pretty ugly. So we're never calling this. We can get rid of that, I think. Is the combat unit not happy about that? No, it doesn't matter. Sorry. Hitting play. Hitting play. So they have an else bar. And now it's working fine. Just fine. But there is still the issue regarding what I initially wanted to fix, which is in the stat entries. When we create a stat entry, stat entries are actually taking care of many things, and we don't want that. In here, we want a stat display, which is going to store all the information we're using here. In here, we're retrieving the icon, the color, etc. We don't want that. We want to store everything here. We don't want that. Why? We want that, but we don't want to call the game instance here. We'll be storing the color, the information regarding the display and use them whenever we want. So let's get rid of this. And in here, we want to get the max stats. The stat display is going to be expose on spawn. We're going to hit compile, hit save. And we don't even need the watch stat because the stat display actually contains the information we want, the stat we want. And now we can do some even fancier stuff than before because we can do something like, hey, let's say that the tooltip text of this is equal to the description of the stats, for instance. We just need now to go back to our focus unit tooltip, refresh. It's going to say, hey, there's an error here. And yeah, there's definitely one because we updated the variable of the stat entries. updated on spawn, expose on spawn. So we want to call the game instance here actually, and we want to store that into a local variable. Temp GI, we're gonna call this temp game inst, and we want to find so are we actually storing the information? I'm not sure. Stat row, we want to get stat row, we want to find, so this is all the stats, the stat display. We want to find the display of that stat and we want to pass it along here. And now it's going to display the maximum value of that stat. So that's for in here else never says less than the maximum, because we can see the maximum in the else bar anyway, the current value in the else bar. So if I'm looking at that guy, it's always saying the maximum value. It's always displaying the maximum value. So this is exactly what we wanted. So the logic is pretty simple and easy actually. So when I take damage, I tell the stat manager to modify to modify the target stat I have. And this calls the dispatcher on stat update. The combat unit is bound to that dispatcher. And it's receiving that event. And only the server rep notify the current else, which calls this everywhere. So this is the same dispatcher we had. So everyone received the value. And when it comes to the stat entry, the stat get max stat and get stats are pretty easy way to recover, to come and read information from the stat table, from the stat map. And this basically carries the current stat of the units all the time. And we're reading these information anywhere we want them. So that's quite easy. So this is wrapping up the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.